essentially going to be around when at the culmination when I return. So it's not going to be this gradual. Oh, here's an event here, and then hundreds or thousands of years later, I return. But it's going to be this compressed period of time. And so that's one way to interpret perhaps what Jesus is saying, and um, that seems to make a lot of sense. Even so, uh, just hang on to what he says here in verse 35. Heaven and earth will pass away. My words will never pass away. In essence, regardless of what happens here, what I say goes. It's coming true. So hang on to that. Don't let time, don't let what other people are telling you convince you into saying what I've told you has absolutely no significance whatsoever. It does. These words that I speak to you will be fulfilled. But he continues in verse 36. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, not even Jesus himself, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Two men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. Two women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken, and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. So, even in these end times, and depending on your interpretation of other scriptures that have to do with the end times, you may come away with feeling that, gee, these are going to be these are going to be extremely unsettling. They're going to be, on the one hand, things are just going to really be torn up. But on the other hand, even in that kind of environment and turmoil, life goes on. Jesus says, even back in the days of Noah, uh, before this great cataclysmic flood came that wiped out everybody, life went on. People did what they were going to do. They got married. They gave away their children in marriage. They ate. They drank. Basically, they hung out at the Dairy Queen. Life was good. And then the flood came, and they were wiped out with really no warning at all. And that's the way Jesus says. There's not going to be, other than the signs that I have told you, there's not going to be any kind of a, hey guys, in 10 minutes I'm returning. Nothing like that. Life will go on. Life will be the way that it always has been, uh, up to the point that he returns. And that's why he says, verse 42, therefore keep watch, because you don't know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you almost must be ready, because the Son of Man may come in an hour when you don't expect him. And it can also be a little bit unsettling when Jesus compares himself to a thief in the night. Just, gee, that's, that a thief is the last person you would want to compare Jesus to. But basically, he says it's kind of like that. What happens when people get burglarized, when their houses get burglarized? They don't know that it's happening until it happens. If they're in the house. Otherwise, you don't discover it until you come back to your house and, hey, what about this broken window? There have been stories in other countries where lawlessness was so rampant, where the burglars actually were scheduling appointments, saying, hey, we're going to break into your house we plan to break into your house tomorrow at 2:00. Don't be there. Uh, that didn't last very long, but it's something like that is extremely rare. The burglar doesn't want you to be around, preferably. He doesn't want to alert you because, for obvious reasons, if you know he's coming, you're going to be ready for him. Jesus says, regardless of whether you know the signs, regardless of even if I don't give you a set time, you need to be ready. It's interesting that this conversation is taking place during a time of in the Roman Empire, where Julius Caesar never advised his troops when they were going to be marching, basically wherever they were stationed. They could stay there maybe overnight. They could stay there maybe a week. They could stay there maybe 2 or 3 years. But the marching orders were, you be ready to up and go out. I'm not going to tell you how long you're going to be here. And if I decide tomorrow morning, or if I decide in the middle of the night, hey, we're breaking camp and going, that's the way it's going to be. That's the way he wanted his troops to be. Always prepared, always ready. And that's kind of the message that Jesus is sending us. Be ready. Even though you don't know what day or hour I'm coming back. You must be ready. Verse 44. Son of Man will come at an hour when you don't expect him, when nobody expects him. This may also explain why when Jesus is talking about these two major events, destruction of Jerusalem and his return, his comments are intermingled. So that, is he referring to one event here or the other? Maybe it's both, but maybe Jesus' intent is, I don't want to give you a real set time, because what will happen? In fact, there's a parable that maybe relates to this that we see in verse 45, where Jesus says, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. That wise and faithful servant will be rewarded. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, 'My master's staying away a long time,' and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he's not aware of." You can kind of get a sense of where Jesus is going with this. If he were to say, "Okay, guys, don't worry, I'm going to let 2,000 years roll by, and I won't be coming back until 2049 on January the 5th at 1 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time." And, how do we think, especially those of us who like to kind of put things off? And you're talking to the head procrastinator here. If I don't, hey, I don't need to worry about that today. I'll think about it tomorrow. I'll take care of it then. There's a tendency just to put things off. And, well, I don't need to worry about it. And, hey, if he's not coming for another 1,000 years, that's not in my lifetime. So I'll just do as I please. Jesus does not want us to be in that kind of mindset, because no telling what kind of mental traps and other traps spiritual traps we're going to fall into if we just put things off. You need to be ready. You want to be the faithful and wise servant who does his duties with the expectation that the master could be coming back. You don't want to be like this other guy who says, "My master's staying away a long time, and I'm just going to blow everything off." And he uses and abuses the people under his charge. He goes off and does stupid things, associates with the wrong people. If Jesus continues in verse 50, "The master of that servant will come on a day he doesn't expect him, and in an hour he's not aware of. He will cut him to pieces." Ouch. Our thought looks like, oh, that's very grim. The Greek for the words that Jesus used basically has a rough translation of, he will take that guy out, he will take a whip and he will whip him unmercifully. He will whip him to the point, up to and including cutting his flesh with the whip. And we know how awful those whips were because they had pieces of metal, they had pieces of bone, and they were designed to really rip you up. So this guy really would be literally cut to pieces. At least he would be bleeding profusely. And that's not the worst part. He would be assigned a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. If you want to know what Jesus really thinks about his opinion of hypocrites, those people who just pose as something, they say one thing, but they're actually doing another. Jesus has a very low opinion of them. He says basically they belong in hell, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus' sermons continue as we go into chapter 25. And again, this relates to the end times and the need to be ready and the need to watch for his return. And here at the opening of chapter 25, we have the parable of the 10 virgins. And Jesus tells the story. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Why 10? Or why 10 virgins? Well, that's the 10 virgins, basically bridesmaids. That's the culture of the day. Why 10? Basically, that was the number you would have, standard number of bridesmaids in a wedding. Something about these bridesmaids, though. 5 of them were foolish. 5 were wise. How so? The foolish ones took their lamps, didn't take any oil with them. This was back in the day when you didn't have flashlights, or let alone that neat little app on your smartphone that you can light things up. Didn't even have smartphones. So all they had were what they called lamps. And actually, they looked more like tiki torches. Basically they were oil-soaked rags on top of a stick. And you soaked them in oil, and you lit them, and those were your lamps. And because they were oil-soaked, basically they didn't burn forever. After a while, the oil got consumed, and the only way you could keep them lit was to bring oil with you and re-soak them, refuel them. So the foolish ones took their lamps, but didn't take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming. How so? Well, a reminder here about the culture of the day. People didn't just get married. It went through a very elaborate process. There were basically 3 stages of marriage, or of a wedding. First was the engagement. And the engagement very likely was arranged by the bridegroom and the bride's parents, basically when they were children. Hey, tell you what, we'll let little Josephine here. We'll set you up with Elijah over here. They can get married, and everybody will be happy. That's settled. Well, that was the engagement, and then after that was a ceremony called betrothal, and that's where the bride and the groom exchanged promises to one another. And then about a year later is what we're seeing here, the actual marriage ceremony, where during that time, the groom has prepared the residence where they're going to live, even if they're living with their parents. He gets everything ready, and when everything's ready, he comes and gets the bride. But given how things kind of, take a little bit longer than you anticipate, when you say you're going to come get them, is not necessarily the time when you come and get her. Basically, so you have the wedding party waiting for the bridegroom to show up. So verse 5, this is what happens. The bridegroom was a long time in coming. They all became drowsy, fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. By trimming, we mean they prepared their lamps. They poured oil, basically got them ready to start burning so they could have some light. The foolish one said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us, both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." Oh, wow, that's going to work out real well. How many places where where you can go and buy oil at midnight? Yeah, not even HEB stays open 24 hours a day. I mean, it just so they're in a world of hurt here, but that's their only option. Verse 10, Jesus continues, "But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready, who had brought oil and had their lamps lit, went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut." Later, we can only speculate how much later, probably not till dawn when somebody opened up. But the foolish virgins come back, and they come on this shut door, and they say, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you." They are locked out. And we call them foolish virgins. Foolish? Well, and of course we have a particular personality in mind when we call somebody foolish or a fool. Really, and yet what Jesus is not necessarily, he's not calling them a really bad person. They're not necessarily bad people, but they were imprudent. They were unprepared. Basically, they went into this wedding procession, this wedding party, without any pre-planning. It was kind of a thoughtless thing. It was kind of like, "Oh, yeah, that thing is tonight. I guess I'll go." Instead of doing what their counterparts did was, "Hey, we got this wedding banquet coming up. We got to get ready for it. That means we need to go and get some oil for the lamp, just in case we need it." Basically, one group of bridesmaids were prepared. The other group were not. They just basically, life went on without any kind of thought, any kind of preparation. And that way, that's how they were foolish. And they were caught napping, not just physically, but in this story, spiritually as well. This is very comparable. Jesus had an earlier parable about the true and the false disciples, where he says, "Not everybody who comes up to me at the day of judgment and calls me Lord, Lord, is necessarily going to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's only going to be those who have followed Jesus, who have sought to do his will, and have basically given their lives to him. And in terms of I'm going to make serving you my priority in life. There are those, and then there are those who just basically pay lip service, and those are the ones who may come up on an unhappy surprise. And again, Jesus says, "Therefore keep watch, because you don't know the day or the hour." And he follows that one up with another parable. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent. What's a talent? Well, when we hear the word talent, we think about certain attributes of personality. Hey, this guy can sing, he can play the piano, he can memorize everything, he can tap dance, whatever. We're not really talking about those kind of talents. Basically, we're talking about money here. And we've already seen some degree or some discussion of money. We know that we talked about denarius. Basically, 1 denarius was basically 1 day's wages. And there's 1 coin. Here's your coin. Here's what you've earned for your day of working out in the field. Well, if we're talking about a denarius, what do we mean by talent? Well, commentators have figured out that a talent is equal to 1,000 denarii. Or to help you wrap your arms around it, 1 talent equals 20 years of wages. So that's a ton of money there. Even with 1 talent, you're set. That's you've come into prosperity. This guy, or one of them, gets 5 talents. Another 2 talents, and the third servant 1 talent. And Jesus says, each according to his ability. Then the master went on his journey. Verse 16, the man who had received 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 talents more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Wow. What a positive response. Hey, thank you for what you've done. I really appreciate it. You've been faithful with just a little bit of stuff. I'm going to put you in charge of a whole lot more. And you're going to be in such a good position. You're going to be happy. Verse 22, the man with 2 talents also came. Master, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more. Same response from the master. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then comes the third servant, and there's a totally different conversation there. Then the man who received 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what's belonged to you. Do you get the kind of the undercurrent of what the guy has said? Basically, he has insulted his master. He says, Master, you're a bad man. I'm afraid of you. Not only that, not only are you a bad man, someone to be scared of, you're dishonest and you take advantage of people. You're not much more than a thief because you go around and you take what's not yours. And, I'm afraid of you. I'm not even sure I like you. But hey, look, here's your talent back. I didn't get anything. I didn't make anything out of it like the other 2 servants. But hey, at least I didn't spend it, and I didn't lose it. So, you should be happy with me. We're even. You gave me a talent. I'm giving it back to you. Well, look at the master's response in verse 26. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So, you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Hey, dum-dum, the least you could have done was put it down at the bank. Yeah, they pay, 0.1% of interest, but at least I would have gotten a few pennies back on it. That was the least you could have done. So, take that talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have even what they have will be taken from them. And take that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Oh, that's ouch. An ungracious servant gets an ungracious judgment. Kind of scary. Some lessons here. Use it or lose it. You know, that has some physical applications. Apparently, it also has some spiritual applications. Lord, God gives us all sorts of talents in here in terms of things that we can do. We kind of trip ourselves up when we create this mental image of the perfect Christian. Well, he can preach a 1-hour sermon. He'll go out and save 22 people at least every third day, and he'll go out and do great things with the paltry salary that he has. That's not what Jesus is saying. I don't make everybody to be the same way. Keep in mind how the talents are measured out at the beginning. Jesus says each according to his ability. So he doesn't expect from person A the same kind of results that he may expect from person B. He grades on the curve, basically, and he's very gracious. All he asks is that we use the talents that he's given us, the capabilities, and use them for his glory and for his benefit, and trust him with the results. The lesson of the third servant was that he did none of the above. He just basically blew everything off. And then when the master was back, he comes up, and we've kind of seen some people do this, where when they fail to perform, they basically put the blame on you. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't do that, but you didn't remind me to do it. You should have told me at least 3 times, and in writing too. But hey, I my email's down and my my computer doesn't work, so you should have called me as well. It. Yes. I should. But no, go ahead. Well put. Yes. Yes. And with God's help, whatever we do is always a little bit more, because he gives that added touch. So the point is, there's really no excuse for not using the gifts that God gives us. He will help us do that. But we certainly don't want to be this third servant who has who gained nothing, who did nothing with the gifts and the talents that God gave him. One more parable, and then Jesus is finished. And it has to do with, it's called a parable in some commentaries, but this really is more like, hey, not so much a parable as it is, this is a prophecy. This is what's going to happen. Verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Jesus is using it one more time. He's using an analogy, a picture that people in that day and age would be very familiar with, given the region and the time being mostly agricultural in nature. Sheep and goats basically graze together, but at night the shepherd would, when he brings the animals in, he separates the sheep from the goats, basically, I guess because they just don't get along very well that long. But they were separated at night, so separating sheep and goats are Jesus' analogy here. Nothing special about the sheep, nothing special about the goats. We shouldn't try to think up 20 negative aspects about goats and their personalities. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's just taking an everyday picture that people are familiar with and applying a spiritual analogy to it. So, the sheep are on his right, the goats are on his left. Verse 34, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least, one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, you gave me nothing to drink, nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to the eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. That's a thought-provoking story, and I think that's where we see some of Jesus' marching orders, where I think the things that we do with each other, I think sometimes with perfect strangers, that's where the rubber meets the road. And again, God is not expecting us to go out and do spectacular things. He doesn't say heal the sick. He doesn't say cure cancer. He just says minister to the sick. He doesn't expect us to cure poverty. I mean, Jesus, in another passage, Jesus says you'll always have the poor with you. There's so many ills of society that are out there. Jesus is not saying, I expect you to cure everything. Just deal with the people that come into your path, that you meet, and where you have the power to help someone. It was like, I remember a story where these two guys are walking along shore on the beach, and there's this starfish, basically. And the guy sees it, and picks it up, tosses it in the ocean. His friend says, that's a failed effort. That's an effort in futility, because there's so many starfish that get washed up like that and can't find their way back, and they die. They're all going to die anyway. And his friend says, well, I helped this one. The whole point is, we don't have to save the world. We have to, but the events, the people that are placed in our lives, they're not so random. Maybe God is putting them there for a purpose, and He's looking to us to do what Jesus would have done, what Jesus always did when He encountered people in need. So, Kind acts, they're the outgrowth of a Christ-like spirit. And, if you really give your heart over to Jesus, if you really make it your top priority to be Christ-like, to follow him, to do what he would do, they're just natural acts of they're second nature to you. Sometimes you don't even think about doing what you do because that's just, it's so an ingrained part of your personality. So, that's where we are. Jesus concludes his series of parables and instructions. In fact, this is really the last sermon recorded in Matthew between Jesus and his disciples. The next few chapters, things really heat up and turn very dark. If you would, read ahead and chapters 26 and 27. That's going to form the basis of our discussion and our lesson next Sunday. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you got something out of the lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.